Welcome to Yeukai Business Show, UK's premier business show where we feature business thought leaders, high achievers, and industry experts. Today's episode is brought to you by World Outsourcing Solutions Limited, a company that specializes in helping executive business owners with virtual assistant services and business growth systems. Here's your host, Yeukai Kajidori.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another very special episode. You see, I can't wait to start this conversation with my good friend Ian, all the way from the US, to talk about something that is important to me and also incredibly important to Ian, and that is to do with business and also the climate change. Ian, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me, Yeukai. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Yes, indeed. You have a saying, which we touched on earlier on, that I thought, we need everybody to hear that. What is that saying?
So we were talking about how personal and organizational development leads to cultural transformation.
Yes, indeed. If you want cultural transformation in your organization as a CEO, or perhaps you're starting your organization today, if you understand this principle that your personal development truly supersedes everything that is going to happen, you are perhaps way ahead compared to when I started. Because when I started, Ian, believe me, I was just throwing mud on the wall, hoping that something would stick. And of course, it doesn't, does it? And it's hard work. But if you start right, with that personal development and put the right culture in place, it's amazing how fast you can get to your goals and how many people you can actually help. And I hope you've got your notebook there, Bill, and you'll be able to dignify your discoveries here today. Now, very briefly about Ian. Is an author, speaker, and a business advisor. As always, we want business advisors here. Through mindfulness, systems thinking, and human-centered design theory, Ian helps individuals and organizations do extraordinarily well. In fact, Ian, you've just helped one organization, get their time back. Do share with everybody here about that case study.
Yeah, appreciate that. The organization that we're talking about here, we just finished up working with after about a year and a half. At the beginning of our work together, they were an industry that had absolutely taken off at the time. They were working 70 to 80-hour weeks. And, as anyone who's ever worked that many hours a week knows, it can be pretty draining on well-being, stamina. It's a quick recipe for burnout. And after about a year or so, we were able to bring their time from 70 to 80-hour weeks down to about 40 to 45, while maintaining their same level of volume. So you can imagine, A, how much more productive you can be, but B, and I think more importantly, how much more well-being one can cultivate, or a team or an organization can cultivate with an additional 20 to 30 hours a week. So that was what we were talking about in terms of getting our time back. And, in terms of the organizational work that we do, we always go through that process optimization stuff in order to free up more time, in order to get to the important work of employee engagement, employee well-being, and social and environmental impact. So after we finished up that process optimization phase, which is what we always start with, then we started to talk more about employee engagement and well-being, and really focus on, A, noticing that the employees' well-being and engagement already increased dramatically by cleaning up their systems and making their day-to-day workflow much smoother. But B, what's really driving them? What brings them to work, and what impact do they really want to have that goes beyond just their day-to-day job, right? How do they turn their job into a career or a vocation? So increasing things like workplace satisfaction, company loyalty, things like that are all also wrapped up in our work.
Well, love that. One of the things I like about what you're doing is it stems up from a personal journey, because you started in education and you faced a lot of perhaps resistance in trying to bring change in places where change was necessary, and that forced you into the entrepreneurial journey. Very briefly, how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, well, you mentioned, a background in education, and that's actually one roadblock that sometimes I bump into is my background professionally as an employee is education. I spent 10 years as an educator. I educated ages 2 to 78. You name the format, I probably did it. And, again, I don't know what education systems like over there in Europe, but here in the US, it can tend to be pretty bureaucratic. Yeah. And so as I was working, it's just my natural skill set or tendency to try and improve whatever system or organization I'm a part of, right? In whatever way I can, to try and go above and beyond job duties and responsibilities. And what I realized through the course of that 10 years was as an entrepreneur, I was always trying to improve process, improve system, in order to increase impact. And for whatever reason, right, and they're all different reasons depending on the organization and the industry, there were roadblocks, there were challenges kept me from doing so. And, it could be anything from people to system to industry, bureaucracy, whatever. But along the way, I realized I've kind of got this organizational management skill set. It's what I'm naturally trying to do anywhere I go anyway. And so pairing that organizational management skill set with a background in teaching the education, as well as that systems thinking, human-centered design approach that you led off with, which is deeply ingrained in our work, that's really what we use to create this kind of holistic system that we work with business owners and businesses at large.
Yeah. One of the things I appreciate about you is after you realized what you were about and things that you were good at, you went on to acquire a master's degree. Not that you wanted a degree, but you wanted to create that accountability to get you to where you want to be. I truly appreciate that. Talk to us very briefly about the thinking around that.
Yeah. So once I realized that I just didn't want to be an employee anymore, and I realized I had more to offer, and really felt like I could scale my impact if I went out on my own. Fortunately, I'm not necessarily on my own anymore. I realized I needed a learning environment to hold myself accountable to building out this business, essentially. And at the time, it was just kind of a conceptual, what's the theory behind this work? But it was also going back to school in order to build a business. And for the true breed entrepreneurs out there, going back to school to build a business might seem a little idiosyncratic, but I needed a learning environment, right? That's really what I needed to hold myself accountable to, and to make sure that I was investing the time and the depth of energy and attention that I wanted to. So I ended up going back to school here at the University of Minnesota to it's the University of Minnesota, but it's the Humphrey School of Public Affairs.
Right.
So I got a master's of public affairs, but it allowed me to self-design my own emphasis, which was really important to me because I've always had these varied interests that never really quite truly fit in any one place. Yeah. And through that self-design emphasis, I focused on leadership strategy and organizational culture because of all of these things that we were talking about, really. And my mission and central ethos throughout all of this has been, if we can help increase the well-being of mission-driven organizations, we can help increase their impact. And so really the way that I look at this myself and the organization is, we are a support system to mission-driven organizations. We want to help them scale their impact. So I went back to school and did a lot of studying, did a lot of customer development interviews, was using my consulting experience at the time as a kind of a solo consultant to piece together this framework that now we really have, and it feels holistic, and it feels like something that is also simple and systematic. And that's really what my goal was in the beginning, was to try and build out a framework that could serve as a stencil or a template for any business in a service-oriented, mission-driven industry space.
I love that.
So I finished up my degree earlier in May, but we've been working ever since, and prior to that as well.
Incredible. Again, the reason I pointed this out, Bill, if you're listening, is because, in our lives as an entrepreneur, as a journey, you may identify that there is a need for you to be in that environment of learning. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm glad that you mentioned it, and you are a living proof that it is great. In fact, it makes you better. If you've got the experience and if you've got the academic background, you become an irresistible force because you become strategic. And that brings me naturally to what I really want to talk about. Ian, you truly believe in something that I truly believe in as well, which is if an organization don't have the right culture, no matter what your goals are, what you're trying to do, no matter even what problem you're trying to solve, you will not get there. And also, if you don't have the right strategy of how to get there, the chances are you're not going to get there. And of course, this will have a direct impact on your goals, what you're trying to do. So we want to spend some time, perhaps over the next 5 to 10 minutes, really talk about culture, strategy, and the ultimate impact that you can make. Ian, you have a unique understanding about culture and how you go about creating it in an organization. Please share with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with, my background as an employee and being a part of organizations on every end of the continuum, which was we've got a great culture, but there are certain things that are challenging or frustrating because of, management, operations, systems, et cetera, workflow. Two, we have a toxic culture, but we've got really dialed in systems, management, and workflow, and everything in between. And so the slogan for our consulting company, Steel Point Insight, is culture by design, strategy by choice, impact by default. The idea is if we can build a culture intentionally, because every organization's got a culture, whether it's intentional or not, every organization has one. If we can design that culture intentionally, we can raise the floor, is one of the things that I say, right? We can bring the floor up. Our lows won't be as low. And then if we can pair that with strategy by choice, really effective strategy tactics, then we have a top-down, bottom-up, inside-out, front-to-back framework to really strengthen the organization as a whole by strengthening the individuals and the teams within it. And if we can do those things, we feel like we can have an impact by default. So culture by design, strategy by choice, impact by default.
Incredible. All this makes sense. Let's dive deep into how do you create a thriving culture? Say if somebody's launching their business, or even when you are already, operations, like many of the people listening here, they've been doing it for the last 7 years, but they've identified that things are not working so well. How do you, talk us through the whole process of changing that and creating that thriving culture in any organization?
Yeah. The first place I would start is just acknowledging how important it is.
Right.
And in order to do that, one of the things that I talk about is a management report that came out of MIT recently. I think it was last year. And what they found was organizational culture is 10 times more important than compensation when predicting turnover. So all of the energy and attention that's focused on compensation and benefits, I'm not saying it's not important, it certainly is, but culture is 10 times more important than that. So the first thing to do is just acknowledge how important it is. And then also to embrace the fact that it's sticky. There is no, one size fits all playbook that's going to work for every organization. Different industry spaces, different people, different, demographic cultures within geographic regions. All of these things are going to have an impact on your organizational culture.
That's right.
That being said, once we get inside the organization, there's a couple things that I think about. One is we need to have a top-down and bottom-up approach. So one of the philosophies, so culture has to come from the top as well as from the bottom. And what I mean by that is we have frontline staff in our organizations that are really, they're the boots on the ground. They're doing the day-to-day work. They are customer facing. They are making everything run smoothly in the background. We need to make sure that we're taking care of them in order for them to, first and foremost, have the best work experience possible. And B, that's also going to improve the customer experience, which over the long run is going to improve business success. And then from a top-down standpoint, we also need leadership to buy in, right? We need leadership to recognize that compensation and benefits is not it. We need to create a holistic environment, a cohesive environment, one that really cares about people, because at the end of the day, a job, I had a mentor say to me one time, a job is simply renting your behavior for an hourly rate. That's all it is.
I love
you
that.
Go to work and you're providing a behavior. But hopefully we've all had the experience of being a part of an organization where we love going to work and we're willing to go above and beyond, day to day or the minimum in order to improve that place of work. Right. So one of the things that at least it's in the headlines over here is this term right now, quiet quitting. Right. I'm just going to go to work and I'm going to do the bare minimum just to get by. Mm-hmm. That's an option, but a healthy culture is going to breed an environment where people are more invested. They're more willing to, work above and beyond. They're going to have stronger relationships. It's going to be stronger customer experience, et cetera. So one thing is that top down, bottom up, from leadership all the way down to frontline staff and teams. We need to make sure that there's cohesive flow top to bottom, as well as I also say front to back and inside to out. And so what I mean by that is, again, from within the organization to the customer and back again. So really focusing on that customer experience, which I think is, that's kind of fundamentals for successful business. But in terms of the side to side or inside to out, one of the other things that we think about, or theories that kind of guides our work, is the diffusion of innovation curve, or the law of diffusion of innovation. And this is the notion that we have innovators, early adopters, an early majority, late majority, and laggards. We've got these different segments of culture or society. And if we can focus on the innovators and the early adopters and get them bought into a healthy culture, to get them bought into strategy, the data and the science will tell us that they're going to move the rest of the bell curve. They're going to pull the rest of the organization with them. And so, this is also one thing that perhaps some people have talked about in terms of, or they're aware of if they're entrepreneurs, is you want to create a pull for your product or service. You don't want to push it onto the industry space. We're trying to do that within the organization from a cultural standpoint. We want to create a pull towards a healthier culture, and that's what's going to move the needle from an organizational well-being standpoint, employee engagement standpoint, et cetera. So again, acknowledging the importance of organizational culture and then focusing on it strategically with this kind of top-down, bottom-up, inside-to-out approach.
Amazing. Thank you. While you were talking, I couldn't resist thinking about James, one of my friends, who asked me quite a while ago now, that things are not going so well and doesn't know exactly where to start in changing them. And clearly it was a cultural issue because there was a high turnover of people in the organization. What would you say to James if he's listening right now?
Yeah, what I would say to James is start with listening. And right. So this again, and I'm assuming James is in the leadership position.
Yes.
I would say start with listening, right? So this goes back to the human-centered design theory that also is integrated into our work. We need to focus on human-centered design and approaches to solving these problems or addressing these challenges. It's, as employees, perhaps many of us have had the experience of, okay, here's this new initiative from leadership and it's getting pushed down to us, but we're not being told why it's happening. We're not being told how to start it effectively. We're not being told what the impact is supposed to be. We just know it's change.
That's right.
So communication is huge, right? And that transparency of communication, but more importantly, for people in leadership positions to start listening at every place within the organization, because it's through those intentionally designed conversations that you're going to learn those little tiny things that are either serving, they're either it's a downturn for your organizational culture or it's an uptick for your organizational culture. And you've really got to figure out what those levers and those buttons are so that you can push them and pull them effectively. So what I would say to James is start listening, start having really intentional conversations and be transparent and authentic in those conversations, and then communicate what you learn. Because again, as employees, so often we might take assessments, right? We're all going to do an employee engagement survey, and then we never see the results of it. Or we see the results of it, but then there's never really implementation on the backside of here's what we're going to do to move the needle in these things that are challenging us or causing problems. So A, start with listening, B, be authentic, and C, be transparent with your communication.
Love that. I remember when we started doing the same thing, we ran what we call customer forum and employee forum, where the team came together. We talked about what's going on. And what was fascinating in that is everybody was so willing to talk about things that were not working and come up with ideas of how things could be improved. And from that experience, and we went back to the leadership team and said, how can we incorporate this into our lives, into the organization? We came up with, again, strategy from what people were saying. And when it was time to implement that, it is amazing how everybody bought into it because they were part of the whole process. It truly is amazing. And I love what you've touched on there, because it truly is a game changer if you can engage with people. I'll tell you something as well. Before we started doing that, everybody in the leadership team were kind of hesitant, like, what are we going to find out? Because they had a lot of stories. But once we started the whole process, it became even more apparent that your team, your employees, are as equally interested in the success of the organization as you are, and just trust them, on credit, really, like, okay, I trust you guys that you're on me. And I love what you touched on there, that be transparent, communicate, with clarity as much as you possibly can, because there's a human spirit in there that would want to connect with you. And when they buy in, it's a game changer altogether. Because of our time, I would love to talk about the strategy aspect of it, because you and I truly believe that without a clear strategy, you're not going anywhere as an entrepreneur or business owner, or even in your personal life. You may know where you want to go, but it could take you forever. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, to put a bow on the culture thing, I think this is a perfect segue, Yeukai, because there can be a strategy to addressing culture, right? And that's what we were just talking about. And one thing that you'll often, that I often experience and we see is we're bumping up constantly into the power dynamics of an organization.
Yes.
Right. For a leader to say, well, do we really want the frontline staff to be designing solutions for themselves? Well, they're the people doing the work, right? And it's not to say that the frontline staff necessarily always understand the higher level decision making that happens, for the executive leadership team, C-suite, boardroom, et cetera. But again, back to that top down, bottom up. So just to put a bow on the culture thing, because I thought you made some really good points there. And then moving forward into the strategy piece, this is where I think you take the kind of intangible components of culture and you pair them with the very tangible tactical approach of business strategy. Yes. So one of the ways that we do that is what we call, it's either reverse engineering or backcasting, right? So we're familiar with this concept of forecasting. We want to think ahead. We want to know where we want to go. But one of the things that I'll often say in my strategic advising sessions is, if you don't know where you're starting from and where you're ending up, how are you going to get there? That's right. It's like being out at sea in a ship without a rudder, because this might be an effective strategy, but it might take you in the wrong direction of where you want to end up. And so we always start with beginning with the end in mind, right? That common phrase from Stephen Covey. That's right. Begin with the end in mind. So all of our work is starting with a core assessment. Where is the organization now? Where is the team now? Where is the business now? And then the very next thing we say is, where do we want it to be? And if we can design a very clear vision, and we have strategies and tactics to do that, often we're using really clear and measurable identifiers or goals for metrics, then we can reverse engineer a path to getting there. We can create that roadmap to success. And there are a number of different ways that we do that. And there's a number of different things that we kind of bake into that process, but it starts with really intentional questioning, envisioning, and clarity. And then from there, we can work our way backwards. And we do that in a couple different ways. One is priority identification. And so this is super, super important because there's a difference between being efficient and being effective. You can be very efficient at things that don't move the needle. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you might finish your workday and still feel like you didn't get anything done. That's because you're not effective. And so we start with priority identification. So there's a couple different ways that we do that. One is the 80-20 rule or Pareto's law. The other is the one thing. So there's some strategies that we have there that we integrate into our conversations. And then we always, always, always talk about time management and how do we bake it into the day-to-day workflow of individuals and teams. And so that comes from time management, taking those strategies, making sure everybody knows what their primary most important thing is, putting it at the first part of their day, and then working concurrently from there. And then we have a couple other strategies and tactics that we'll use along the way. It's just kind of a wash, rinse, repeat system, right? It's simple, but it's systematic. So we want to take that strategy from the visioning into the day-to-day operations. And that starts with having a clear vision and then really working diligently to figure out what does this look like from a day-to-day operational workflow standpoint.
Outstanding. Absolutely brilliant. When you do these things right, you've got the right culture and you've got the strategies in place. It's amazing the level of impact you could have, not only on an individual level, on an organizational level, and even on a massive scale. Talk to us about some of the things you've seen, from organizations that have implemented the strategies we talked about today. Yeah.
Well, we focus primarily on working with mission-driven organizations because of our values, right? Social and environmental justice is really what drives us, and individual well-being, because we believe that it's individuals and individual organizations that collectively will create the systemic change that we really need to see in the world.
That's right.
So, from a process standpoint in our work, we always go through 3 phases. The first is process optimization. We want to clean up the day-to-day operations in order to free up time, energy, and bandwidth. Then we move to employee engagement and well-being, because if we can strengthen the individual's well-being within the organization, we're strengthening the organization as a whole. And then the third phase is thinking about social or environmental impact. And we're always thinking about scale, right? So I'm sure we're all familiar with these kind of, these startup companies that just take off. It's because they've got that rocket fuel. They've got the right system that works. Now, they may also have financial backing and a number of other things too, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's an organizational culture and the individuals within that organization that make it successful. And so typically, once we're deeper into work with our clients, we're starting to talk about social and environmental impact. Because if we can get through the days, the weeks, the months, and the years without those dumpster fires cropping up that we just need to, put out the fire in order to get back to baseline, we can really start having a conversation around what's the greater impact that we want to have in the world. So to reference that case study from earlier, one of the things that leader wanted to do, she said, look, this team has been working for 70 to 80 hour weeks for the last year. I want to give them their time back. So after we cleaned up operations, not only did we lower the number of hours that they were working a week, but they also implemented monthly mental days off, so mental health days. And then everyone was able to increase their vacation time usage and be unplugged while on vacation, right? Because for small business owners especially, it's easy to take vacation, but not really be on vacation. You're still checking email or whatever. And then the third thing that they implemented that they decided was important to them as a team was, how do we give back to the community? So they've implemented quarterly giving back experiences. So one team member, one individual from the team, every quarter is planning a new activity where the entire team and company gets together and gives back to the community. So it could be any number of things. So focusing on that social and environmental impact is really important, because that's, to use the cliche, that's how we be the change. If we're really mission-driven organizations that are aligned with our values, we need to not only do it inside the organization, but outside the organization as well.
Outstanding. Well, thank you. This is great. And I know that there will be individuals who wants to carry on learning from you, or even use some of the services that you provide on that beautiful website of yours. By the way, your website is incredible. Guys, you go check out what I consider a great website. Visit Ian's website. In fact, what is the website, Ian?
Yeah, so there's 2 different websites. If you're looking for me specifically, to book speaking engagements or learn about the book that I have coming out, you can go to www.reviveyouandi.com. That's reviveyouandi.com, Revive You and I. If you want to learn about organizational consulting, business advising, go to stillpointinsight.com, Stillpoint Insight. Either one of those websites, you'll be able to get a hold of me. Whether it's directly or whether it's through the team, and would love to connect. This is really what we're here for is, our mission is to support mission-driven organizations. And then me as an individual, my job, I think, is just to add as much value to individuals' personal well-being as possible, because that's really what I believe in. We need to make the change, and we need individuals and organizations to do it.
Outstanding. Ian, this has been very informative and also helps people to implement. I love the concept that you've shared there. And if you're listening, at the bottom of this recording, there will be links to take you straight to Ian's websites. Ian, thank you for being here today with us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Yeukai. I appreciate it. Hope we gave some valuable lessons and insights to your audience.
Absolutely. Not only my audience, I had a lot of great information in here that you've shared with me. And look, I want to wish you great in your next project. And I know that you've got a book coming up in February. Perhaps when it comes, we'd love to have you back. Maybe talk about that so we can get so many eyeballs on that book, if that's possible.
Yeah, that'd be great. Appreciate the invite.
Awesome. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us here today. As always, we bring you experts so that you learn something that you can apply here today. And we want to encourage you, you discover maybe 1 or 2 things, schedule how you're going to be implementing that in your business or in your personal life today, and then come back to it. Now, if you haven't done that, but after a week, ask yourself, what has stopped you from implementing that? Because whatever is stopping you from implementing what you've discovered today could be stopping you from all other areas of life. And wouldn't now be the time to deal with it so that you can go back and begin to smash those goals? So I want to encourage you, those notes you have there, I know you've got plenty there, Bill, implement one of those. Let us know how you're getting on with today's session that we've had today. And before I forget, our training program is still on there, where we're teaching you how to start, scale, and monetize your podcast. In fact, if you haven't got that one, just join the community. There will be a link below here for you to join the community. Absolutely free. We want to provide a lot of value. Join the community. In there, we'll talk more about the programs that we have. Look, until next time, live well, live with passion, know that the best is truly yet to come. Thanks again, Ian, and talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Yeukai Business Show. We will be back to bring you more episodes with success stories and advice straight from the experts. Want more? Check out www.yukaibusinessshow.com. Get your free trial of our virtual assistant service today. Just visit www.worldoutsourcingsolutions.com. Quote WOS18 or send us an email at support@worldoutsourcingsolutions.com.